Last unit of the book. Are you ready? This is sociology or social psychology, and it's different from all the other chapters 1 through 13 because it's not just about you. It's about you amidst the group. It's about group dynamics and you. So that's why it's called social psychology. In class, I showed them a quick little video, and it was about the attribution error. The attribution error basically states that we as humans judge other people in a dispositional way while we judge ourselves situationally. So if a mean waitress comes to the table and she's mean, you might call her a name when she walks away. If you're judging her dispositionally, you'll say she's a blank. You could fill in the blank with whatever horrible word you want to think of. But if you judge her situationally and she's mean, when she walks away, you might say, oh, I wonder what happened to her. She must be having a bad day. We tend to judge ourselves situationally and judge other people dispositionally. So when the neighbor parks the car in a bad way and parks it in your side of the street, you might say, they're not very nice. Look at the way they parked. That's judging dispositionally. You're judging someone's character based on their parking ability. If you're judging them situationally, you'll say, oh, they must be in a hurry or something must be wrong. They parked all weird like that, you know. And you're kind of giving them excuses based on the situation. Do you see the difference? Good. Okay, you have to know a little bit about central root of persuasion versus peripheral root of persuasion. And this is about how attitudes affect actions, how people can persuade you. And let's just talk about really quick advertisements, right? What do advertisers use all the time? They use celebrities to sell you a product. Now, I'm going to talk about proactive in class because I think it's a really great commercial and a lot of you guys have seen it before. Proactive is an acne medication and they'll use really famous celebrities to sell it. Justin Bieber, Julianne Hough, a bunch of people, Jessica Simpson, Britney Spears, they've been out there advertising for Proactive, and you see before and after pictures. Central root of persuasion says that you're going to base persuasion on facts. The proactive commercial tells you how the chemical works to get rid of pimples and acne. That's the central root of persuasion. But they also use the peripheral root of persuasion, right? They're going to use a pretty face. They're going to use a celebrity. And a person might say, oh, I like proactive because Justin Bieber uses it. I like proactive because Jessica Simpson uses it or Britney Spears uses it. A pretty face. So you might elect and vote for prom king because they're good looking. Is that central root of persuasion or peripheral root of persuasion? Think about it. Did you say peripheral? Because you are correct. If you vote for someone because they're good looking, right, that's a superficial thing. But if you vote for them for prom king or queen, not because they're good looking, but because they've done a lot for the school and they're very active in our school and they're involved in a lot of clubs and, you know, they're great people. If you voted for them for that reason, that's more central root of persuasion. Now, there's something called foot in the door phenomenon and door in the face phenomenon. This is kind of funny. Foot in the door, think about you literally getting your foot in the door. It's almost there. Then you can open the door, right? It's when you agree to a small act and then later agree to a big one. Like if someone says, hey, can you babysit my dog while I go out on a date? And you say, sure. Then they might say, well, can you babysit them for the whole weekend? Because you agreed to babysit the dog for the date, the chances have increased exponentially that you will also say yes for the weekend. That's called foot in the door. Small, right, then leads to large. So think of foot in the door going small to large. Door in the face, think of a door literally getting slammed in the face. And when someone says no, it's like, will you babysit a dog for the entire weekend? No, I'm busy. I've got things to do. Door in the face. That might not work. Um, Foot in the door phenomenon might work a little bit better for that. Think about when you ask your parents, right? Can I have $1,000? They'll be like, no, just kidding. Can I have $5? Then all of a sudden, right? the $5 looks appealing compared to the $1,000. When you're asking for babysitting for the weekend, you could say, well, just kidding. Can you just babysit them for tonight while I go on my date? And then, okay, I'll babysit them for tonight. It goes from big to small, right? Do you see the difference between door in the face and foot in the door? Door in the face goes from a big favor, then you're agreeing to a small favor. Dad, can I have $1,000? And they're like, $1,000 for what? No. Then you say, I'm just kidding. Can I have 20 bucks? I'm just going to go out. And then they're like, okay, yeah, 20 bucks is fine. That's door in the face. My husband does that to me all the time. He'll say stuff like, oh, I saw a Porsche I really like. I'm like, a Porsche? Just kidding, just kidding. It's a Tahoe. It's very reasonable. And then I'm like, okay, fine, the Tahoe. See what I'm going at? Like, sometimes it persuades me because I'm thinking of, I don't like the idea of a sports car or a Porsche, but I do like the idea of a family car like a Tahoe. Okay, and then role playing does affect attitude. And if you think about it, we learned about in the emotions chapter, the whole fake it until you make it. Sometimes when you have the attitude, you kind of like, I don't know, fake it. You just become that role, and then you eventually make it. All right, we're going to be seeing in class the Stanford prison experiment where Dr. Philip Zimbardo from Stanford took people randomly and made them guards and prisoners. And we're going to talk about the dynamics of that. Some of the words that are affiliated with this particular study is dehumanization and de-individuation. And what we're going to find is people miraculously became the roles that they were assigned. Guards became sadistic, really mean guards, and prisoners started to act like prisoners, helpless and sometimes rebellious, and it shows the power of the situation. And there's that word dehumanization and the power of the situation. He calls this the Lucifer effect, that anyone has the potential to do bad things if the situation warrants it. And we learned a lot from this experiment, even though it was considered unethical and it can never be redone again. It was done once and it can't be done again. So next in class, we talked about conformity. And why is this picture funny? Look at the picture. It's all a bunch of thug looking guys, and they have mohawks and like they got piercings and they're all wearing a shirt that says nonconformist. And if we all dye our hair, if we all get tattoos, if we all get piercings in our face, aren't we conforming to the nonconformist? Everybody conforms is what I'm trying to say. We conform to one degree or another, and that's why this picture is funny. And let's just talk about tattoos really quick. I mean, like, lots of people have tattoos. Like, if you thought of it, 40 years ago, maybe more, tattoos were only like, biker gang people wore tattoos and they must be criminals and they ride motorcycles. Now everyone has a tattoo. Your grandma could have a tattoo and it's okay. Like, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, it wasn't so okay. It was seen as really rebellious and nonconformist. But if everyone starts getting tattoos, guess what? It's conforming. Okay, so here we're still talking about why we conform, and in class I showed a couple of cute videos of how people conform in everyday normal life. So the picture above, you see the little girl in uniform, and she's like looking up, and the funny thing is a teacher walks by and also looks up, and that's called the chameleon effect. It's natural for humans to kind of be curious as to what other humans are doing, and we do what other people do. If everyone in the auditorium starts clapping and you don't know what's going on, you might start clapping too. That's called the chameleon effect. And a lot of that has to do actually with mirror neurons. If we go back to Unit 3, the neurology chapter about the brain, we learned that mirror neurons kind of make us do what other people do. So if you're really talking to someone and you're making eye contact and you're really engaged and they start playing with their hair or something, or they're twisting their hair, you might start to twist your hair too. Or if they scratch their face, they do something like this to their face, you might do it too. Isn't that weird? That's called chameleon effect. Think about yawning. One person yawns yawns, and another person yawns. Guess what that is? Mirror neurons. But in sociology terms, it's called chameleon effect. And you know what? That could also happen to our moods. It's called mood linkage. Happy, fun people versus sad and boring people. You hang out with a bunch of happy people who are laughing, chances are you're going to be laughing too. If you hang around people who are sad and like blah all the time, you might feel that way too. So kind of like moods could be contagious that way. So why do people conform? There's two different reasons. One's called normative social influence. We conform because we think that we're expected to. We want to do the right thing. So we conform because we think it's the norm. Get it? Like norm being typical or normal. And number two, it's informational social influence. We want to be right. And if everyone's going right, we want to go right. And if everyone's heading this way, we think that that probably is the correct way to go. If everyone's saying the answer is B, well then you know what? The answer might be B. Because, like 10 people said it was B, so, what's wrong with me? I think it's C, but why are 10 people saying it's B? Number two, informational social influence means that we kind of assume that the majority is right, and we just follow along. Those are two main reasons why we conform. And remember, conforming is when we do what other people do. Niche conformity is identifying yourself as a part of a microculture. This could also be like a subculture, like, for example, like my family is, a Latin-based family, like most of us in our family. We're all pretty much Hispanic, and I married into a family that's also Latino. So I feel like I'm a part of that culture. I identify it, the foods I eat, the music I listen to, right? The kinds of customs that we practice. And I feel like I conform to that social group, and that's niche conformity. When you find yourself conforming to a specific group, and you're not conforming to like the mainstream group, that would be niche conformity. Got the difference? Small little difference, but not much. Okay, so we did this in class too. Check out those lines. Which one of those three lines, 1, 2, or 3, they're called comparison lines, which one of them match the standard line? I'm waiting for you to answer. Did you say 2? You are correct. Very good. What if 4 people ahead of you out loud said the answer is 1? Clearly the wrong answer, right? Well, this test has been done many times. The test was created by Solomon Asch. He also tested conformity to peer pressure. And he said that if enough people say the wrong answer out loud for you to hear it on purpose, that you will too. And you know what? His hypothesis was correct. The majority of folks fell for it, doesn't matter what age they were. And let's face it, a kindergartner could answer this question, right? If you answer the wrong question, then it's for sure that you're just lying on purpose because everybody else is saying the wrong answer on purpose. Hence, you've conformed. And this line test kind of proves that everyone can fall for it. Doesn't matter how old you are. But there are some statistical differences between age ranges and the social dynamics of it all. But still, conformity is conformity. And it is proven here with the Solomon Asch experiment. People call it the line test. And another reason why we put conform is because we're kind of like fitting into our roles. And there's something called impression management theory. And it kind of states that life is like a stage. What role are you playing today? And, if you're a girlfriend, if you're a daughter, if you're a boyfriend and you're a son, you're a student, you are a football player, right? All these things are roles, aren't they? And when you go home, you become, I am the son, I am the daughter, I am, part of this family dynamic, and you play a role. When you go to school, you become a student, right? You act like a student. Same thing for adults, right? And if I use myself as an example, I'm a mom, right? And I go home and I become mom, and I do the mom things, and I clean, and I do dinner, and I counsel my kids, and I'm there for them. Then I come to school and I become teacher, and I'm professional and I do my job, and I do things I'm supposed to do as a teacher, and I don't stray from that role. And then, you know what? I'm also a friend. So when I go do friend things with my friend group, right, and I hang out with the girls, I become the friend, right? And my bestie's with me and we're really silly and we've known each other since high school. And so, we talk about silly stuff and we do silly things. It doesn't matter how old you are. You still have a good friend and you still might act a certain way with them. And, we'll go hang out with the girls and I become one of the girls, right? Isn't that me fulfilling a role? Don't we all do this, right? Don't we all do this? We do this in our careers. We do this in our social life. And that's what impression management theory says. Social comparison theory says we kind of judge ourselves by comparing ourselves with people our same age, our same socioeconomic status, and that's how we kind of gauge our self-esteem. A lot of who we are as a self is about the people that we surround ourselves with, and we fulfill certain roles. So life is like a stage. What role are you playing today? And right now you're playing student, right? And you're becoming the student, you're doing your thing, you're taking your notes, you're listening, you're learning. You're a student. Good job. Now, this is about the Milgram study, and Stanley Milgram did a study on conformity to authority, and this is the advertisement he set out to gather up his participants. And in class, we saw the Milgram study, but done like today. The Milgram study originally was done in the 60s. And the Milgram study shows how people, right, off the street, people like you or I, anyone, they signed up for this experiment and they were put to a test. Would you electrically shock a perfectly nice stranger that you just met in a lobby? Would you shock them because a guy in a white lab coat told you to? Now, if you're thinking of the answer in your head, chances are you're probably thinking, of course not. I'm not going to shock and hurt some perfect stranger I just met because some guy is telling me to. Well, a vast majority of people do, because a guy in a lab coat looks like an authority figure. He looks like a doctor or someone who's taken leadership or some kind of leadership role, someone who's an authoritarian kind of figure. And he's demanding that you do it because you're signed up for this experiment. You must continue, teacher. The experiment requires you to continue, teacher. And so you do. If that blows your mind, then you need to watch this video or Google it. You can Google Stanley Milgram's shock experiment, and it's there. It's all over YouTube. You could find one. And this is also considered unethical. However, it's been done again and again today. Okay, some extreme group behavior is things like cults. If you think of a cult, that's the epitome of groupthink and mind guarding. There's a really good sign, right, that groupthink is happening when you're not allowed to speak your mind and they shut you down the moment you have a difference of opinion. It's important to be able to express yourself and not feel like you're getting in trouble or feel like you're going to face severe ramifications if you say your opinion. And this is called groupthink. It was studied by Irving Janis, and he would know because he himself was a part of a cult, and he could tell you all about how cults work, because no longer are you encouraged to critically think and ask questions and formulate opinions. You basically have to say what they want you to say, think how they want you to think. And if you don't fall in line, guess what? You're going to lose friendships, you're going to lose jobs, you're going to lose everything because we're going to shun you because you're a bad person. How about that? And that's how cults work. It's a real extreme polarization. It's the enhancement of the group's inclination through interaction with each other. They become polarized, and this can lead to groupthink. It's something to be very careful with. And mind guarding is how they criticize you, ostracize you, shun you, make you feel bad because you have a difference of opinion. And they even threaten you by not being your friend or not letting you be a part of the group. And they'll say, well, if you do that, then you're not one of my friends. If you belong to that group, then you can't be a part of my group. And that's really polarizing, isn't it? And so we have to be very careful with that kind of extreme group thinking. And it happens more often than you think. Now it's important to see how group influences us. There's something called group facilitation versus group inhibition. Does the group enhance your performance? Then that's called group facilitation or social facilitation. If the group hinders your performance, like you mess up, that would be inhibition, social inhibition. So let's say you play volleyball, right? And you do fantastic during practice, but you mess up during the actual games when people are watching. That could be a classic case of group or social inhibition, right? The people watching you make you so nervous that you mess up. But when you are a star at the games and you're not so good during practice, that could be a case of group facilitation. That means the crowd, the eyes, the cheering, the fans makes you perform better, so you do. Social loafing. Have you ever been put in a group in school, like your teacher puts you in a group, and like say you're a group of 4 or 5 people, and there's like one person who doesn't do anything? Are you that person? Right? It's not because you're a bad person. It's because you can't, right? Humans kind of take the road of least resistance, the road of least effort. And if you can get away with not doing something and somebody else does it for you just do it, and that's called loafing. There's an actual word called loafing in psychology, in sociology, and it's called social loafing. Why? Because you feel less accountable because the group is basically shouldering the responsibility. And then number two, you view the contribution as dispensable. You figure if I put forth effort, what does it matter? We're all going to get the same grade anyway, so I might as well let them do it. That's the second reason we loaf. De-individuation is loss of self-awareness. I always think of a good concert. It's been a while since we've been to a big concert, but if a concert is really great and you're with all these people, hundreds of people in the crowd, you're singing, everyone's singing together, everyone's jumping up and down and dancing, you kind of lose yourself, right? You just lose who you are and you're just part of the crowd. You're part of the sea of people enjoying this concert. That's a positive example of de-individuation, but de-individuation could also be negative, like in a riot, right? You would never ever dream about picking up a rock and throwing it through a store window, right? But what if 300 people around you are doing it? What if they're chanting something that's you're passionate about? What if you're very angry too? You might pick up a rock and throw it through a store window as well. That's called de-individuation. You've lost yourself, and now you're the crowd. And if 300 people are throwing rocks, you might throw rocks too. And that's a part of riot psychology, also studied by social psychologists. In this little clip that I show everyone in school, it's a story about Jane Elliott, and it's called the Blue Eye, Brown Eye Experiment. If you weren't in class when you saw it with us, you need to Google it. It's really good. The teacher's name is Jane Elliott, and you can just Google or YouTube Blue Eye, Brown Eye Experiment and take a look at it. It's based on a book called The Eye of the Storm, where she separated and segregated her class into Blue Eye, Brown Eye kids. And one day, the Brown Eye kids were superior, and the blue eye kids were inferior, and she watched the dynamic of how they treated each other. Then she switched it around the next day. The blue eye kids were superior and the brown eye kids were inferior, and she watched that group dynamic. And here's what she learned: that the superior kids, the day that they were perceived to be superior, they really did act differently and did horrible things to the ones that were perceived as inferior. And when you watch the videos, you will see how she kind of had a chance to show kids what it was like to feel, the wrath of discrimination. One of the most popular words in AP is cognitive dissonance. And I show my kids this video of an AP psych teacher who wrote a song about cognitive dissonance, and he actually plays a guitar and he sings it to you. And the AP teacher is not me. Like, I don't play the guitar. I can sing a little bit, but no, I'm not doing that. I love you, but no. And cognitive dissonance is, watch my hands. It's not neurons, by the way, not neurons. Cognitive dissonance is when you have a thought, right? But then you perform an action that goes against the thought and it makes you feel bad. And that's the dissonance. It makes you feel kind of like uncomfortable. It makes you feel like it's an inconsistency, right? So here's an example about smoking. We all know smoking is bad. That's the thought. We know smoking is really bad for your health. It causes cancer. There's all kinds of evidence to attest to that. But then a person smokes, right? And that makes you feel bad. That's the dissonance, right? And dissonance happens all the time. And then we justify our actions. You know what smokers say very often? The reason why they smoke? Do you guys know some reasons? Sometimes smokers will say, well, it helps me relax, right? That's justifying. When we experience dissonance, we justify. Here's another one. We know cheating is wrong. There's the thought. We know cheating is wrong, but then we cheat on a test and it makes us feel bad, right? But how do we justify it? We say, well, everybody else is cheating, right? We justify it, we rationalize that act. We'll say things like, well, the teacher's not teaching this particular content and I'm not getting it and I don't want to fail, so I had to cheat. Justify. So when you see the little video, you will see the song that goes with it, and it's kind of funny and silly, but it helps you remember cognitive dissonance. Now, in psychology or in sociology, we have to talk about discrimination. We have to talk about stereotyping, and there is like cognitive roots in prejudice, that prejudgment. There's something called just world phenomenon that basically says that we as people think that the world is just and victims might deserve it because they probably did something wrong. That's the just world phenomenon. It's actually not really true. I mean, sometimes people are victims of something that they did to perpetuate an act, like a person who's a criminal might get hurt, but they performed a crime, and so they're getting hurt because they're in the act of trying to evade the crime. The just world phenomenon is like this way that we could sleep better at night. When we see a homeless person, right, and we might say to ourselves, well, they probably don't work very hard. They're probably, using their money for drugs. It's a way for us to sleep better at night instead of saying that this person has come upon really hard times and it's no fault for their bad circumstances. So it's kind of a way a person can, justify, again, rationalize behavior that, might make us feel uncomfortable. Contact hypothesis, they say, is the cure for things like discrimination and prejudice. If we are in places where there's lots of diversity, like South Florida is a very diverse place. We have people of all nationalities and religions and ethnicities, and we're very, very integrated here in South Florida. That's good for us because that way we get to experience all these different cultures and ethnicities and religions, and we get to see that they're just like us, there's nothing to be afraid of. A lot of times people stereotype what they don't understand or know. And so the great thing about living in South Florida is the experience of this diverse, culture that we have here. Now, there's something of a word that's kind of a negative word. I show a funny clip from my big fat Greek wedding in class, but it's called ethnocentrism. And I know you've heard of egocentrism. Remember Piaget, egocentric? When a person's egocentric, they're self-centered. Well, if you're ethnocentric, aren't you ethnically self-centered? Yeah, you think that your culture is right, your culture is correct, and everybody else's is wrong and weird. And that is being ethnocentric. It's the belief that your own culture is superior to another, which is why it's more seen as a negative than a positive. It's one thing in having pride in your ethnicity and culture. That's fantastic. But there's another one that says that, well, it's not just pride. You're looking down on other ethnicities and culture as if they're weird or wrong or bad. One of my favorite things to study in sociology is proxemics, and this is about the distance between people. And as Americans, we really value our space. And now that we're forced to socially distance, because of pandemic reasons, the 6 feet, it's very far away, and it's kind of weird to talk to someone one-on-one because really, pre-pandemic, before pandemic, talking to someone one-on-one was about 18 inches to 4 feet away from someone's face. Now we're forced to stand 6 feet away, and it's a little weird having a one-on-one conversation. That's more like social distancing, which is 4 to 12 feet away from your person. And then public distance is 12 feet and beyond. What I do in class is public distance because I'm in front of the class and I'm talking to the person way across, the other end of the room, which could be more than 12 feet and beyond. So these are the 4 zones of proximity according to Edward T. Hall. And you know what? When we violate those zones, people act really funny. So I showed a little clip in class of breaking social norms, and I have the link that's next to me. See that? I have like little YouTube links that you could look up these funny little videos of people breaking the social norm of proxemics. And as we're winding down the chapter, they do talk about interpersonal attraction. And in social psychology, why do you like somebody else? Why do you like somebody else, and why do they like you? Well, according to social psych and the research that they've done, there's about 4 reasons why you might like someone. And when I'm saying I mean really like. And number 1, it could be proximity. There's that word again. The aspect of nearness. They're around you a lot. You might fall in love with your neighbor or someone that sits next to you in class because they're near, because they're around. There's something also called the mere exposure effect that basically says the more that you are with someone, the more you like them. The more you hear a song, the more you like it. The more you're exposed to something, you kind of get used to it, and it just kind of it grows on you. It's kind of like that song that you hate at first, but then you've heard it 37,000 times played out in the radio, and then all of a sudden you're singing, Despacito, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I hate that song, but why am I singing it in the shower? Exactly. So that's mere exposure effect. Number 2, you know why you like somebody else? Because they might be similar to you. They like the same movies that you like, and they've read the same kind of books, and you guys watch the same shows, and you talk about the same things, and you listen to the same kind of music, right? And so that idea that opposites attract is really kind of statistically incorrect. We're more likely to like people that are like us, similar to us, that we like the same thing. And that's why sometimes it's so funny and fast how we could form an instant human bond when you watch a show and you're like, you watched that show? Oh my gosh, I just finished the last season last night. It was so great. My God, you remember episode 8? Oh my God, that was so crazy, right? Episode 8. Yeah. And so it happens to me when I see a Stranger Things t-shirt. And I'm like, Stranger Things? I love Stranger Things. Oh my gosh, let's talk about it. And I've been in the middle of Disney World with my Stranger Things shirt, and people have stopped me to talk about it. And of course, I have to talk about 11 and blah, 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 and all this stuff, right? That's number 2. We tend to gravitate towards people that are like us, and that like the same stuff that we like. And then number 3 is reciprocity. Reciprocity is like a cycle. I like you, you like me kind of thing. And so do you know that you're more likely to like someone that you heard liked you first? Did you catch what I just said, or I'm talking too fast? You are more likely to like someone that you heard likes you first. That's right. So if you hear, hey, psst, I heard Marsha likes you, and you don't even know who Marsha is, and all of a sudden you're like, Marsha, yeah, right? That's reciprocity. It's like a circular process. And it's like you get this vibe that, oh, they like me. It increases your likelihood of liking them back just because you heard it first. Isn't that funny? Yes. So that thing that happens in middle school and in high school where you hear oh, Juan likes you, and you're like, what? Juan likes me? And then you're thinking, who's Juan? Oh, that guy? Woo. You might start liking that person because you just heard about it first. Isn't that odd? I know, it's super odd. And the last one is physical attractiveness. We might like people because of society standards of what's beautiful, and they might fit that mold, and so you're attracted to them instantly because you're supposed to, because that's what society says is beautiful right there. And remember that first impressions, and we talk about implicit personality theory too in class, first impressions are very, very strong. And it's because that when you first see someone and you say, oh, they look very nice, the word and label nice travels with other labels. So if someone is nice to you, you're like, oh, that's a very nice person. They're probably also, what's attached to nice? Responsible. They're probably good students. They probably make a nice friend. They're probably, like puppies. And those things make you like someone. That's a first impression. But what if you make a bad first impression, right? And you walk in and you're rude. If someone labeled you rude, what does that also travel with? If you are rude, you're probably also not a good friend, not very responsible. You might not be a very good student. They start to make assumptions about you that might be completely incorrect. That's why it's important to make a good first impression. And bystander effect is a big part of sociology. Bystander effect is when, it used to be called bystander apathy, when witnesses see someone get hurt and they do nothing. It's a result of diffusion of responsibility, and we watched a few of these videos in class as well. And it's important to talk about the social roots of inequality. There's emotional roots of prejudice, and there's a couple of theories that you have to know: in-group and out-group biases. So just think of it as this. It's like Cyprus versus Western, right? Who's your in-group? That's right, say Western. We're wildcats, right? And we might go against Cyprus because they're the out group. And sometimes you might start to make assumptions about them and say, Cyprus kids are snobs. Cyprus kids are this and that. It's just because they're the out group and you're the in group of Western, and you're making assumptions about them that aren't true. And that could be the root of prejudice. Also, these are the roots and kind of like the guidelines of what leads to aggressive behavior. And aggression itself might be genetic, it might be neural, biochemical. It also could be caused by aversive events like situational factors around you. Like the heat in Florida can make people really mad even if you're in the happiest place on earth. Last experiment is the realistic conflict theory, when they did the robbers cave experiment, where they kind of put two groups against each other in a boys' summer camp. And we saw a clip of that in class as well. And we are done with this